The rain was coming down in relentless sheets, turning the city streets into rushing rivers and making it almost impossible for anyone on that bridge to see more than a few feet ahead. And Marcus Chen tightened his grip on his 3-year-old son Tyler as they hurried across, the boy's small body wrapped in a red blanket that was already damp at the edges from the cold storm. At 32, Marcus had learned how to navigate the city at every hour and in every kind of weather. Because when you worked the night shift at the hospital and had no one else to watch your child, you simply did what you had to do and kept moving, no matter how heavy your legs felt. His dark hair clung to his head, his gray button-down shirt was soaked through and stuck to his skin, and Tyler had finally fallen asleep against his shoulder after another long day at the unreliable daycare Marcus could barely afford. While they made their way back to the tiny apartment where Marcus would snatch maybe 2 hours of sleep before his next shift began, because this exhausting routine was his life now and had been for a year, ever since Tyler's mother had decided that motherhood was not for her, and had left without a backward glance, without a note, without even a clumsy explanation, just vanished and taken his sense of stability with her. Marcus was half lost in the same looping thoughts he carried every night, thinking about overdue bills and how his body ached with exhaustion and asking himself how much longer he could keep this pace before something finally broke, when he saw her through the curtain of rain. A young woman was standing on the wrong side of the bridge railing with her hands gripping the cold metal, her body leaning forward over the dark, churning water below, and she wore a light-colored dress that clung to her in the downpour, while her blonde hair hung in wet strands around her face. Even from a distance, Marcus could tell she was probably in her mid-20s, and even the rain could not hide the fact that she was crying. And in the same instant that his heart seemed to stop, it began to pound so hard that he could feel it in his throat. The words, "Don't jump," tore out of him before he had time to think, and his voice cracked as he added, "Please don't jump." And in that single moment, with a storm raging overhead and a woman poised between life and death, everything about this night turned into a decision point for both of them. And if this already has you holding your breath and asking what he will do next, then this is the perfect moment to pause for just a heartbeat, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who might need it. Because what happens on this bridge will change more than one life. The woman's head snapped around and, for a long heartbeat, they simply stared at each other through the rain, while Marcus saw a kind of desperation in her face that made his chest ache, a raw pain that no umbrella could shield. He called out to her to stay where she was and begged her not to move while he shifted Tyler more securely against his shoulder and began to move toward her with careful, measured steps, trying not to startle her further. She told him to go away, her voice breaking as she insisted that he should leave her alone and that there was nothing he could do. Yet Marcus kept walking slowly, telling her that he could listen, that he could stand in the rain with her for as long as it took, and that whatever else happened tonight, he just wanted her not to jump. She demanded to know why he cared, crying that he did not even know her, and he answered that he did not need to know her to care whether she lived or died, and by then he was close enough to see her more clearly, to see that she was beautiful, even with rain and tears streaking down her face, but also that she looked lost and broken in a way that went beyond the storm. He pleaded with her to come back over the railing, promising they could talk or say nothing at all, that there was no script she had to follow, only the choice to stay alive a little longer. She noticed Tyler then, her eyes widening as she realized he was holding a sleeping child, and her expression shifted to something like shame as she apologized, and said that his son should not have to witness this, and that Marcus should take him and go. Marcus tightened the blanket around Tyler and told her that the boy was asleep and that he was not going anywhere without her, his voice firm but still gentle as he asked her name and told her it mattered, because she mattered, and her life mattered, and she was not just a blurry shape on a bridge in the rain. For a long moment the woman was silent, and Marcus almost lost her answer under the sound of water and passing cars. But then she whispered Sophia so softly that he had to lean in to hear it, and she repeated it, as if reminding herself that she still existed. Marcus introduced himself and Tyler, told her that whatever she was going through was not worth this end, and promised her that as hopeless as things felt, this was not the way her story had to finish. She told him he could not understand, that no one could, and he gently asked her to help him understand by explaining what had brought her to this exact night and this exact spot. Sophia shook her head, her fingers tightening on the metal railing until her knuckles turned white, and then finally breathed out that she had lost everything. Her company, her reputation, everything she had worked for, and that it was all gone. When Marcus asked what she meant, she said that she was, or had been, the CEO of a tech startup called Sophia Tech, and that they had been planning to change the world, that investors had poured millions into the idea and everyone had believed in them, until she trusted the wrong person. Her business partner had embezzled money, made shady deals behind her back, destroyed the company, and then left her to face the fallout. The business was bankrupt. The investors were suing her personally, and her name was all over the news as a fraud, even though she had never known what he was doing, and she insisted that no one believed her when she said she had not been part of the scheme. Marcus felt his heart break a little more as she listed the losses, the business she had poured herself into, the savings she had burned through fighting lawsuits, the apartment she had been forced to leave, the friends who believed the headlines instead of her. And she told him that she had nothing left, that she was nothing without her company and had no idea who she was, if she was not that successful person anymore. He told her firmly that she was Sophia, not a headline, that she was someone who had built something from nothing, someone whose dream had been compelling enough that people invested millions, someone who was in the middle of the worst season of her life, but was still standing on this bridge listening to a stranger instead of letting go. She insisted that she could not start over, could not face everyone, could not go through the humiliation and the pain, but Marcus moved closer to the railing and asked her to look at him and at Tyler. And then he told her that a year earlier, his girlfriend had walked out without warning, choosing to leave motherhood behind, and that he had gone overnight from being a full-time worker with a partner to being a single parent with a toddler, and no support system, and no idea how to make all the pieces fit. He explained how he worked nights at a hospital, made barely enough to cover rent and daycare, and was so weary that days blurred together, and how there had been nights when he had wanted to give up, when the weight of responsibility and exhaustion felt unbearable, but that he had kept going because Tyler needed him, and because, even in the middle of all the hardship, there were still small, bright moments. The sound of his son's laugh, the way Tyler wrapped his arms around his neck when he picked him up from daycare, the way he whispered, "Love you, Daddy," before bed. And those flashes of light made the dark stretches worth fighting through. Sophia began crying harder as she told him that she did not have anyone like that. No child, no partner, no one who needed her or gave her a reason to keep going. And she said she felt like she had nothing and was nothing. Marcus told her that she still had herself, and that this alone was reason enough to fight for another day. He extended his free hand toward her, palm open in the rain, and begged her to take his hand and come back over the railing so she could give herself a chance to rebuild, to find new dreams, to figure out who she was beyond the success she had lost. She asked again why he cared so much, reminding him that he was barely surviving himself and did not need to carry her burdens. And he answered that maybe he needed to help her, that maybe that was his purpose tonight, because sometimes people needed to be needed in order to feel that their existence mattered. And in this moment, she mattered to him. He kept his hand outstretched, his arm shaking slightly from the cold and the weight of Tyler, and asked her one more time not to jump. Sophia stared at his hand for what felt like a very long time while the storm raged around them, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement to create halos in the darkness, and Tyler shifted against his chest without waking. Finally, slowly, she reached out and took his hand, and he guided her carefully back over the railing until her feet were on the safe side of the bridge, at which point her legs gave out and she collapsed against him. Marcus caught her with his free arm, held her while she sobbed into his chest, kept Tyler secure and warm against his shoulder, and whispered that he had her, that she was safe now and not alone. And if the moment where her fingers finally close around his hand made your heart drop and then lift again, then this is a powerful place to tap like, hit subscribe, and share this video. Because you never know who might be standing on their own metaphorical bridge tonight, needing to hear that someone cares enough to hold on. They stayed like that in the rain until Sophia's sobs faded into quieter shivers. And then Marcus called 911, calmly explained what had happened, and stayed with her until the paramedics arrived. The emergency team recommended taking her to the hospital for an evaluation, and Sophia, exhausted in body and spirit, agreed without much resistance. Before she was loaded into the ambulance, she turned to Marcus and thanked him in a hoarse whisper she could barely get out, telling him she did not know why he had stopped, but that she was grateful he did. And he told her to take care of herself and asked for a promise that she would try. She promised, and he watched the ambulance disappear into the wet night before he adjusted Tyler on his shoulder and carried his son home through the rain, arriving even later than usual and more drained than he thought possible, yet strangely lighter inside. Because helping Sophia had reminded him that even in his darkest, most exhausted days, connection and compassion still mattered, and that showing up for another human being could pull both people a little closer to the surface. 3 days later, Marcus was at the hospital, moving through his rounds and checking in on patients while fighting the fog of another sleep-deprived stretch, in which he had managed maybe 3 hours of rest in 2 days, when a woman walked into the ward. At first, he did not recognize her, because she was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back from her face, and she had no makeup on. She looked younger than she had on the bridge, less polished and less like a headline, but somehow more real. When she said his name, he turned and his eyes widened as he realized it was Sophia, and he asked what she was doing there. She told him that she had needed to find him, that she wanted to thank him properly, and tell him what had happened after that night. And she explained that the hospital had kept her for evaluation, made her talk to a counselor, and forced her to sit with what she had been through and with the things Marcus had said about starting over and finding new dreams. She admitted that she was not okay yet, not in the way people casually claimed, but that she was on her way there, and then she pulled out a piece of paper with her new phone number written on it, saying she was staying with a friend while she tried to figure out her next steps and that she wanted to ask him something. She asked if she could take him and Tyler to dinner to say thank you, and when he hesitated and told her she did not owe him anything, she insisted that she wanted to, that she wanted to meet Tyler properly when he was awake, and that she wanted something tangible to hold on to, a reason to keep moving forward, because seeing him with his son and hearing how he kept fighting through his own struggles had given her hope that she could do the same. Marcus eventually agreed, and that one dinner turned into something more. They shared a meal and conversation that flowed more easily than either of them expected, and the next time they saw each other, they ended up taking a walk in the park while Tyler toddled between them. That walk led to Sophia offering to watch Tyler one evening, so Marcus could get a few extra hours of sleep, which turned into regular meetups where Sophia and Marcus and Tyler formed a quiet, unexpected little unit. Over the following months, Sophia worked slowly and deliberately to rebuild her life. She accepted a job at a nonprofit that helped small business owners, using her painful experience to guide others through legal and financial storms. She agreed to testify against her former business partner, who was eventually convicted of fraud, and she started therapy to process the trauma, the loss, and the identity crisis that had nearly pushed her off that bridge. Through it all, Marcus was there, not trying to fix everything for her or rush her recovery, but simply showing up as a steady friend, someone who listened when she needed to talk and sat in silence when she did not, someone whose presence reminded her that good people still existed. One evening, as they sat together on a bench watching Tyler play nearby, Sophia asked why he had helped her that night, why he had not just kept walking and taken his sleeping child home, and he answered that he knew what it felt like to be drowning and unseen, and that he had hoped that if he could at least acknowledge her pain and make her feel visible, it might be enough to give her one reason to choose life. Sophia told him that it had been more than enough, and that she needed to confess something. On the bridge that night, she had not been undecided, she said. She had already made up her mind and had been waiting for the right moment to jump, until she heard his voice and saw him holding Tyler. In that instant, she had thought that here was a man who had every reason to be bitter and exhausted and angry at the world, yet he was still stopping in the storm to help a stranger, and his kindness had made her wonder whether she might also be strong enough to keep going. Marcus told her he was glad she had stayed, and that he was glad he had stopped. And when Sophia reached over and took his hand, she asked if it was crazy that she was falling in love with him, given that they had met in the worst circumstances possible, and that she had been trying to end her life when he walked up. Marcus smiled in a way she had not seen from him before, and said that he thought it might be the most honest beginning he had ever had, because she had seen him at his worst, exhausted and barely holding things together, and he had seen her in her darkest moment, and they had both chosen to keep showing up for each other anyway, and that did not feel crazy to him. It felt real. When she asked whether he felt it too, he admitted that he did, and if watching two broken lives slowly lean toward each other after everything they have survived is stirring something in you, then take a second here to like this video, subscribe for more real-life redemption stories, and share this with someone who believes they are too far gone, because you never know who might find a lifeline in a story like this. A year later, they were married in a small ceremony surrounded by a handful of close friends, with Tyler proudly walking down the aisle as the ring bearer, clutching the rings as if they were made of something even more precious than gold. By then, Sophia had started her own consulting firm, using her expertise and scars to help businesses recover from crises, and Marcus had received a promotion at the hospital that finally allowed him to afford reliable childcare and a slightly larger apartment. Yet more important than the professional improvements was the fact that they had built something neither of them had truly expected to find again. A family rooted in honesty, vulnerability, and the daily decision to keep showing up even when life felt hard. On their first wedding anniversary, they returned to the bridge where they had first met. The sky was gray, and it was raining again, though not as fiercely as that night, and they stood at the exact spot where Sophia had stood on the wrong side of the railing and where Marcus had called out to her through the storm. Sophia asked quietly if he ever thought about what might have happened if she had jumped, and Marcus told her that he thought about it every day and was grateful every day that she had not. She said she was grateful too, and explained that on that night she had believed she had lost everything that defined her, her company, her reputation, her identity, and had thought those things were all she was. But he had shown her that they were simply things she had, not who she was, and that the person she truly was, someone capable of building, dreaming, and loving, was still there underneath the rubble, and just needed someone to help her see it. Marcus told her she had done the same for him, because before she came into his life, he had been in survival mode, working, caring for Tyler, barely keeping his head above water, and not allowing himself to imagine wanting anything more. She had reminded him that life could be bigger than getting through the day, that he could dare to dream about having a partner, someone to share the burdens and joys with, and that he did not have to carry everything alone. Their now 4-year-old Tyler tugged on Marcus's hand and announced that he was cold and wanted to go home, so Marcus scooped him up and agreed, and they turned away from the water. As they walked away from the bridge, Sophia glanced back one more time at the spot that had nearly been the end of her story, and realized again that it had instead been the beginning of everything that mattered. The night she had been ready to jump, convinced she had no reason to live, and a struggling single dad with a sleeping toddler had stopped in the rain to tell her she was wrong, and to offer her his hand, his compassion, and his refusal to let her disappear. That single night had changed both of their lives. Marcus had moved from barely surviving to truly living alongside a partner who understood both struggle and resilience. And Sophia had gone from wanting to end her life to building a new one richer and more meaningful than anything she had known before. They had saved each other, not through some dramatic movie-style rescue, but through the small, persistent actions that real saving usually requires: showing up, refusing to give up, believing in each other when they struggled to believe in themselves. Sometimes the darkest moments we face turn out to be the doorway to the brightest beginnings, and sometimes the worst nights of our lives are actually the opening chapters of our best stories, even when we cannot see that yet. Sometimes a stranger's compassion is exactly the lifeline we need to choose life over despair, and one person's choice to stop and care can ripple outward in ways they will never fully understand. Marcus had pulled Sophia back from the edge of that bridge, and every day since then, they had been pulling each other forward, toward healing, toward hope, and toward a future neither of them could have imagined back when the rain was pouring down and everything felt lost. One rainy night, one moment of compassion, one choice to stop and really see another human being. That was all it took to change two lives forever. And sometimes that truly is all it takes. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of simple kindness, or gave you even a little bit of hope, then don't let it end here. Like this video so more people can find it. Subscribe to our channel for more soul lift stories that shine light into dark places, and share this story with someone who might be standing on their own metaphorical bridge tonight, because you never know which click, which share, or which story might become the lifeline that pulls them back.